The encounter in the market. The sun was sinking behind the high walls of the alien city, casting long shadows over the crowded marketplace. The air was heavy with the smell of roasted meat, strange spices, and the sweat of too many bodies pressed together. Loud voices rose above the crowd. Merchants shouted to advertise their goods, and alien traders haggled in rough tones. In the middle of all this noise walked a human man, his clothes old and worn, his steps slow, his face tired. He had come to this market many times before, not because he liked it, but because survival forced him to. Humans were rare in this city, most of them poor, most of them ignored. He was no different. Every day he struggled to earn a few coins for food. Sometimes he found work lifting heavy crates or cleaning the streets. Sometimes he went hungry. Today was one of those hungry days. His stomach ached, but he kept walking, searching for a chance. As he moved past a row of merchants selling fruits with glowing skins, his eyes caught something strange. At first, he thought it was another stall or a strange statue. But then he stopped. His heart gave a sharp beat. In the very center of the market square stood a tall pillar made of dark stone. At the base of the pillar was a small figure tied with ropes. It was a child. Her skin was pale blue, her hair silver like threads of light. She was thin, too thin. Her arms marked with bruises where the ropes cut deep. Around her neck hung a wooden board with cruel words painted in large black letters. "Take as you please." The human stared, his mouth dry. He thought maybe his eyes were tricking him, but no, she was real. The girl's eyes slowly lifted to meet his. They were large, filled with fear, but also with something else, something like a silent cry. Around him, the marketplace carried on as if nothing strange was happening. Aliens walked by, some even laughed at the sight. A pair of large insect-like traders nudged each other, making crude jokes. Another alien threw a piece of fruit at the girl. It bounced off her shoulder, but she did not cry. She only closed her eyes for a moment, then looked again at the human. He felt anger rise inside him, but also confusion. Why was she here? Why was no one helping? He turned to a nearby merchant, a tall creature with red scales and sharp teeth, and asked in a low voice, "Why is she tied there?" The merchant gave a cold laugh. "Because that is her place, human. She is nothing. She is weak. No family claimed her, so she belongs to the crowd now. Take as you please, food, play, or cruelty. It is the law here." The human felt a chill run through him. He wanted to turn away. He wanted to keep walking. After all, he was only a poor man, barely able to save himself. What power did he have to fight against alien laws? His life was already hard enough. Helping her would only bring trouble. He told himself this again and again, but the girl's eyes never left his. They were wide, filled with pain, but also hope. She did not speak, not a single word. Yet her trembling body and her silent stare seemed to whisper louder than any voice. "Help me." The crowd shifted, and the human felt himself pushed closer to the pillar. His heart raced. He could hear the laughter of those who enjoyed the cruel display. He could see the bruises on the child's skin. He could see how weak she was. He thought of his own childhood, of hunger and loneliness, and for a moment, he saw himself tied there in her place. The human clenched his fists. Sweat rolled down his forehead. He looked around. The guards were far, but not too far. If he tried to do something, they would see. The punishment would be harsh, maybe even death. His mind screamed at him to step back, to look away, to save himself. And yet, his feet refused to move. The girl blinked slowly, and a single tear slid down her cheek. That was the breaking point. His chest tightened. His breath came hard. He knew then that he could not leave her. He could not pretend he had never seen. He took one step forward, then another. His heart pounded like a drum. The voices in the market grew louder. Some aliens noticed him, frowning. Their whispers followed his every move. What is the human doing? Does he not know the law? He will bring punishment upon himself. The human's hand lifted. Shaking, he reached toward the rope around the girl's wrist. The rough fiber was cutting her skin. He wanted to tear it away, to set her free. The marketplace seemed to freeze. All sound fell into a heavy silence. Dozens of eyes turned toward him, waiting. His hand hovered just above the rope. He could feel the weight of the world pressing down. Would he dare to defy the law of the city? Would he risk everything for a child he did not know? The girl's lips parted, though no sound came. Her eyes locked on his, and in that moment, he felt a strange connection, like fate had brought him here for this single choice. And then, with trembling fingers, the human touched the rope. The story of his compassion had just begun. The silent plea. The moment his fingers brushed against the rough rope, the air in the market grew heavy. It was as if the entire square had stopped breathing. The chatter of merchants faded. The clatter of coins seemed to die away, and the crowd turned its full attention toward the human. Their eyes glowed with disbelief, amusement, and some with quiet anger. To touch the rope was no small act. It was to challenge the rule carved into the hearts of the people. Yet he had touched it, and in that single act, the course of his life began to shift. The girl flinched as his hand hovered near her bonds. She did not pull away, nor did she cry. Instead, her large glowing eyes locked onto his face. There was no sound from her, no words. Yet, in the silence between them, something deeper spoke. Her stare carried a message more powerful than speech. Her lips trembled, her body shook. But her eyes begged him with a desperate cry. "Please, help me, I cannot endure this anymore." The human swallowed hard, his throat felt dry, and his chest was tight. He could feel every gaze burning into his skin like fire. The whispers around him grew sharper, like knives slicing through the still air. Some voices laughed at his foolishness, others muttered warnings of doom. A heavy presence pressed against him, a reminder that the guards were watching. Even if they had not yet stepped forward, the human was aware that at any moment they could descend upon him, dragging him away. Yet, in that instant, none of it mattered. The girl's silent plea drowned out all else. Memories stirred within him. He recalled nights when he too had been hungry and abandoned, a boy on a broken street, ignored by passers-by. He remembered what it felt like when no one reached out, when no one cared enough to help. That memory stabbed deep into his heart as he saw her trembling hands bound to the pillar. He thought of himself, of his own suffering, and of the bitter loneliness he had carried for years. And then he saw her again, not as an alien child, not as a stranger, but as a reflection of his own pain. The girl's lips parted slightly, and though no sound escaped, he imagined he could hear her voice in his mind. It was soft, like the whisper of a lost child. "Do not leave me." Her stare was unrelenting, fragile yet fierce. It was not only fear that shone in her eyes, but also hope, the fragile kind of hope that blooms when the heart is near despair, the kind of hope that clings even when all else is lost. The human's body trembled. He knew the danger. He knew the punishment that waited for him if he acted further. Still, his compassion pushed against his fear. He clenched his jaw and steadied his breath. His hand reached out again, this time pressing against the tight knot at her wrist. The rope was rough and thick, and it bit into her skin, leaving angry red marks. He pulled at it, his fingers working against the fibers. The girl gasped softly, the first sound she had made. Her eyes widened, filled with a spark of disbelief that someone would even try. Gasps spread through the crowd like ripples across water. The marketplace erupted in low mutters. "He dares. He touches the cursed rope," one alien growled. "The human has lost his mind," another sneered. A large, insect-faced merchant spat on the ground, his mandibles clicking with disgust. "Let him try. He will pay the price." Laughter followed, harsh and cruel. But underneath it was something else. Unease. For though they mocked him, there was a strange weight in the air, an unspoken sense that what he did mattered. The guards at the far end of the square shifted uneasily. They had not moved yet, waiting perhaps for the council's word, but their hands rested on their weapons, ready to strike. The human noticed them from the corner of his eye, but he did not stop. The girl's silent plea gave him courage. Every pull on the rope was a fight against the laws of the city. Every tug was defiance against cruelty. The girl leaned forward as much as the bonds allowed. her thin shoulders trembling. Her silver hair clung to her damp face. Her lips trembled as if words wanted to come but could not. Instead, her eyes flooded with tears. They rolled down her pale blue cheeks. Glistening under the dim light of the market, each tear was a spark of her soul. Each one whispering gratitude, hope, and fear all at once. The human felt those tears like a blade in his chest. He whispered softly, his voice hoarse, "I will not leave you." Though his words were low, the silence of the crowd carried them far. The aliens heard, and their reactions sharpened. Some hissed with anger, some jeered with mocking laughter, yet others fell into a thoughtful silence, as though something about those words unsettled them. One more pull, and the first rope snapped loose. The girl's small wrist dropped free, her fingers curled weakly, trembling as if she could not believe she was no longer bound. She looked up at him, her lips quivering, and though no voice came, her eyes spoke volumes. They shone with light, with fragile hope, and with a deep connection that chained itself to his heart more powerfully than any rope could. The silence was broken by a deep, booming voice. One of the guards stepped forward, his shadow long and dark. His voice rang through the marketplace. "Stop where you are, human, release her, or suffer." The threat carried weight. The crowd stirred, eager to see what would come. The human turned his head slightly, his body trembling between fear and courage. The girl's free hand clutched at his sleeve, her grip weak yet desperate. Her silent plea had become more than a whisper. It was now a cry in his heart, and he knew, without doubt, that turning away was no longer an option. The market waited, the crowd held its breath. The guards readied themselves. The human stood before the pillar, one rope broken, one child half-freed. The suspense stretched like a drawn bowstring. What would happen next? Would he surrender to fear, or take the final step into defiance? The choice hovered before him, and the world leaned in to watch the act of defiance. The human's hand shook as he pulled at the second rope. His body trembled under the weight of countless stares, but he refused to stop. The girl's grip on his sleeve was faint, weak as a whisper, yet it burned into his soul with the force of fire. She needed him, and for the first time in years, he felt that his life had a meaning greater than his own survival. His breathing came heavy, sweat dripping down his temples as he twisted the rope. Every fiber resisted him, as though the very city itself was fighting to keep her bound. The crowd hissed, jeered, and growled like a restless storm. Voices clashed in every direction. "He dares to defy the decree," one cried. "Let the guards tear him apart," another shouted. Others laughed cruelly, eager to see blood spill, but there were also murmurs of doubt among them. Whispers too soft to rise above the noise. A few eyes lingered on the human not with hatred, but with an uneasy curiosity, for though his act was reckless, it carried a strange weight, something that unsettled even the hardened hearts of the onlookers. The human tugged harder, his knuckles white, and at last the second rope gave way, snapping free. The girl stumbled forward. Nearly falling into his arms, he caught her. Steadying her trembling frame, she pressed against him with desperate weakness, her face buried against his chest as if she had found the only safe place in the world. He could feel her rapid heartbeat against his ribs. Her silent plea had now become a silent trust. She had chosen to believe in him. The crowd roared with outrage. The silence of suspense breaking into chaos, a group of guards stormed forward, their heavy boots striking the ground like drums of war. Their weapons glowed with electric energy, humming dangerously. The largest among them raised his arm and barked, "Seize the human! Strike him down! He has broken the sacred law!" The human's heart thundered inside his chest. His arms tightened around the frail girl. He had freed her, but now the question was what next? He was outnumbered, unarmed, and weak from hunger. Against the armored guards he stood no chance. His mind screamed at him to surrender, to release her before the blows fell. But when he looked down at her, when he saw her wide eyes clinging to his, he felt something stronger than fear rise within him. It was not pride, nor was it anger. It was the burning flame of defiance, the will to say no when the world demanded silence. The guards advanced, the crowd pressing closer to witness the punishment. Their faces were eager, twisted with the hunger to see him fall. But as the human lifted his chin, his gaze unflinching, something shifted. He did not look like a beggar anymore, nor like a man broken by poverty. In that moment, standing tall with the child in his arms, he looked like a warrior who had chosen to fight not with weapons but with his own unyielding spirit. "Why do you defy us?" the lead guard demanded, his voice booming across the square. "This child is nothing. She is given to the law. Who are you to resist?" The human's voice was rough, hoarse from fear and exhaustion, but steady. He answered with words simple and clear. "Because she needed me." Those words rang louder than the guard's order. The crowd hushed for a brief instant. The merchants stopped shouting. The laughter died on alien lips. The words lingered in the air, carried by a strange weight. Some sneered, some scoffed, but others shifted uncomfortably. For the first time, the law they had accepted all their lives felt fragile. Exposed by the raw truth of a struggling human's voice, the lead guard snarled, lifting his weapon high. Blue sparks leapt across the blade, the energy humming with deadly promise. "Then you will pay the price for your foolish compassion," he declared. And he swung down. The human turned his body. Shielding the girl against him, he braced for the strike. Ready to endure whatever pain would come, his arms tightened, his jaw clenched. He would not let go, not even if it killed him. The blade struck the ground inches from his feet. The energy crackled, scorching the stone. The crowd gasped as the guard's strike had fallen short. The guard stared at him with rage but also hesitation. For the human had not begged, had not dropped the child, had not crumbled to fear. Instead he had stood, trembling but unbroken. The sight unsettled even the enforcers of the law. Another guard shouted, "Restrain him, bind him before the council. He must face judgment." The soldiers surged forward, and rough hands tore the girl from his arms. She cried out for the first time, a sharp, desperate sound that pierced the noise of the square. Her voice was small, fragile, but it carried across the crowd, echoing in the ears of all who listened. It was the sound of a child who had tasted freedom for a heartbeat and was being dragged back into chains. The human lunged, struggling against the guards who seized him. Their blows fell hard, their fists and weapons striking against his back and ribs. He grunted in pain but fought wildly, his eyes never leaving the girl as she reached out to him. The guards forced him to his knees. Pressing him down, the crowd shouted, some cheering, some uneasy. Torn between the law and the strange spark that had ignited in their hearts, blood dripped from his lip, his vision blurred. But still he raised his head, his eyes locked on the child, and though his body was broken, his spirit refused to bow. He shouted through the pain, his voice raw but burning. "You are not nothing. You are not a thing to take. You are alive, and I will not stop." The marketplace froze, the guards stunned, the crowd silent. His words thundered with a power no weapon could carry. The girl's tears fell like jewels, her small hands reaching even as she was dragged away. The guards tightened their grip, pulling the human toward the council chambers. Yet his defiance had already planted a seed, a question, a fire that could not be silenced. The act of defiance was complete, but the price had only just begun. The council's judgment. The heavy iron doors of the council chamber groaned as they swung open. The guards dragged the human inside, his wrists bound tightly with glowing restraints that bit into his skin. His steps were unsteady, his body bruised and aching from the beating he had suffered, yet his eyes burned with quiet defiance. Behind him, the alien child was forced to follow, her arms bound once more, her silver hair falling over her frightened face. Her small frame trembled, but every few steps she dared to look at him, and every time she saw his battered figure, she found a spark of courage to keep walking. The chamber was vast, a circle of stone walls carved with glowing symbols that pulsed with blue light. At the center stood a high platform where the counselors sat, a row of imposing alien figures draped in flowing robes. Their faces were stern, their eyes sharp and cold. Around the chamber stood rows of spectators, nobles and merchants who had followed the procession to see the judgment. Their whispers filled the air like 1,000 insects buzzing. eager to witness the fate of the foolish human who had dared to break their sacred law. The lead guard shoved the human to his knees at the center of the floor. His hands slammed against the cold stone. His body throbbed with pain, but he forced himself to remain upright. Refusing to bow his head, the child was pushed beside him, tears running down her pale cheeks. Her gaze clung to him, desperate and afraid. He turned his head slightly and gave her the faintest nod, a silent promise that he had not given up. The highest counselor, a tall alien with 4 gleaming eyes and skin like polished obsidian, rose to speak. His voice was deep and commanding, echoing through the chamber. "Human, you stand accused of defiance against the decree of this city. You touched what was forbidden, you released what was bound, and in doing so you insulted our law. What defense do you bring before this council?" The crowd fell into silence. Waiting to hear his response, the human lifted his head, his lips split, his face swollen, but his voice steady. "I have no defense. I saw a child bound like an object, and I could not turn away. I freed her because she needed me." Gasps rippled through the chamber. The words were simple, yet they carried weight. The counselors exchanged glances, their expressions shifting between anger and disdain. The highest counselor narrowed his eyes. "You speak of need as if it excuses law. You are nothing here, a beggar, a stray of a dying race. What right have you to stand against the decree of our people?" The human's jaw tightened. His voice rose again, low but firm. "I may be nothing to you, but she is not nothing. No child should be left to chains. No soul should be given to cruelty. If your law demands such things, then your law is broken." The chamber erupted, spectators shouted, some with rage, others with disbelief, some hissed curses demanding his death. But among them were those who looked uneasy, shifting in their seats, for though they despised his words, they could not deny the truth buried within them. The child looked up at him with wide eyes, her lips trembling. Her gaze seemed to drink in his every word as though they were lifelines pulling her from despair. The counselor struck his staff against the floor, sending a loud crack through the hall. "Silence," he commanded. The noise fell away. His gaze bore into the human with venom. "You dare to question the foundation of our city. You dare to claim your compassion above our order, foolish human. You will learn the cost of defiance." Another counselor, older and cloaked in crimson, leaned forward, his voice dripping with disdain. "You should have walked away. You should have bowed your head like the rest. Instead, you chose rebellion. Do you think your sacrifice will change anything? Do you think one act of pity will undo centuries of tradition?" The human's voice rose louder, stronger despite the pain in his body. "Maybe it will not change your tradition today, but it will change something. It changed her. It changed me. And maybe one day it will change those who watched and saw that cruelty is not strength, but weakness." The chamber trembled with noise again, this time more divided. Some shouted for his blood. Others fell silent with troubled expressions. The counselors shifted, visibly unsettled by his refusal to break. The child's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not only of fear, they shone with pride, with the fragile beginning of hope. The highest counselor slammed his staff once more. "Enough! The council has heard your words, and the council delivers judgment. You are guilty of defiance, guilty of insulting our laws, guilty of standing against the will of the people. For this crime, you shall be punished. Your body shall carry the marks of your foolishness, and your suffering will be an example to all. Compassion will earn you nothing but pain." The sentence hung in the air like a blade. The guards yanked the human to his feet. His arms were pulled behind his back. Chains clinking as they dragged him toward the chamber doors, the child cried out, her voice breaking as she called after him, "No, please!" Her scream echoed through the hall, silencing even the cruelest voices among the spectators. The human twisted his head back as the guards pulled him away. His body was broken, his fate sealed, but his eyes burned with fire. He met the girl's gaze one last time before the doors closed between them. "Do not be afraid," he whispered hoarsely. His words carried across the hall, soft yet powerful. Sinking into the hearts of all who listened, the doors slammed shut, and darkness swallowed him as he was dragged into the depths of the city where punishment awaited. Yet in that chamber, long after he was gone, the silence remained heavy, and the counselors themselves shifted uneasily in their seats. For though they had condemned him, his words still lingered, carving cracks in the stone of their authority. And so the stage was set, the judgment had been passed, but the true price of his compassion had only just begun. The price of compassion. The dungeon. Beneath the council hall was cold and merciless. The air smelled of damp stone, rusted iron, and old blood. The guards dragged the human through narrow corridors, their footsteps echoing against the walls like the march of doom. His body swayed with each shove, his back already aching from the lashes of the crowd's anger. His wrists bled where the chains cut into his skin. Yet, despite the pain, his eyes still burned with defiance. The child's cry still echoed in his ears, and that sound was the only thing keeping him upright. They pushed him into a wide chamber lit by burning torches. Shadows danced across the stone floor where ancient stains told the stories of countless punishments carried out before. At the center stood a tall wooden post scarred with cuts, dents, and dark patches that would never fade. Around it were cruel tools designed to break bodies and spirits. Whips hung on hooks, rods of iron glowed faintly from the fire, ropes and chains coiled like snakes waiting to strike. The guards smirked as they dragged him toward the post. One spat at his feet. For a worthless child you will bleed, human. You will learn that compassion is nothing but weakness. They bound his arms to the post, pulling the chains tight until his shoulders strained painfully. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. His body trembled, but he refused to beg. He closed his eyes for a moment, hearing again the girl's voice when she had cried out for him. That fragile cry gave him strength. It reminded him that his suffering was not meaningless. He was not only enduring for himself, but for her, so she would know she was not forgotten. The first lash struck across his back. The sound cracked through the chamber like thunder. Pain exploded through his body, white-hot and searing. His teeth clenched as a groan escaped his throat. His knees weakened, but he forced himself to stay upright. The guards laughed. One raised the whip again, and the second strike tore across his skin, leaving red lines that burned like fire. Each blow was followed by laughter from the men who carried it out. Each lash was meant to break him, to force him to scream, to force him to surrender. But he did not cry out. He bit down against the agony. His breath ragged, his vision blurred. Blood ran down his back, staining the ground, yet he remained silent. He refused to give them the satisfaction. His silence grew heavier than his cries could have. It unsettled the guards. Their laughter wavered as the lashes continued. By the fifth strike his body was shaking violently, his skin torn and raw. His lips split open as blood filled his mouth. Still, he endured. He lifted his head with defiant eyes and met the gaze of his captors. His voice broke through the air. Weak yet unyielding. You can break my body, but not my will. The guards hesitated, anger flashing in their eyes. They struck harder, faster. Desperate to silence his spirit, his back became a canvas of pain. His body sagged, his breaths shallow, yet his words lingered. His suffering was no longer just punishment. It was becoming a symbol, unknown to the guards. The chamber was not entirely closed. Above them, narrow slits in the stone allowed faint glimpses from the upper hallways. From there, whispers spread. Some of the onlookers who had followed the procession pressed close to hear the sound of his cries. Instead, they heard silence. They expected weakness, but they saw endurance. His defiance began to spark doubt in the hearts of those who watched. If a starving human could bear such agony for the sake of one child, then what did that say about them, who stood by in comfort and said nothing? At last, the guards paused, breathing heavily. Sweat rolled down their faces. They stepped back to admire their work. His body hung from the chains, blood dripping freely, yet his head still lifted, his eyes unfocused but burning. A faint smile touched his lips, not of joy but of quiet victory. He had not broken, he had not surrendered. The lead guard sneered and struck him across the face with the butt of his weapon. You are a fool, you suffer for nothing. The girl will be taken again. and all your pain will be wasted." The human's voice was hoarse, broken, but it rose again, soft yet sharp as a blade. "As long as she remembers that someone cared, it is not wasted." The chamber fell into uneasy silence. The words hung in the air, echoing against the stone walls. The guards shifted uncomfortably, though they tried to hide it. They had seen many scream, many beg, many collapse under the weight of punishment, but never had they seen one endure with such will. Never had they heard words that turned pain into strength. The punishment continued, each lash another attempt to destroy him, but his spirit held. His voice grew fainter, his body weaker, yet his eyes never lost that fire. That fire pierced through the cruelty, and even the hardest guard could not fully ignore it. When at last the council declared the punishment finished, the human was left dangling from the post, his body broken, his back torn, his breath shallow, barely alive. The guards unchained him and let him collapse onto the cold stone. He fell heavily, his blood pooling around him. Yet, as they dragged him from the chamber, his head turned weakly and his eyes still burned. The child was waiting in the shadows of the hall, guarded and bound, her face streaked with tears. She saw him carried past, her heart twisting with pain. She whispered his name, though he could barely hear it. Her small voice trembled. "You are not alone." Her words reached his ears faintly, and a weak smile crossed his lips. The council had punished him. The guards had beaten him, his body was shattered. Yet his spirit was unbroken, and as he was dragged back toward the prison cells, his suffering left a mark not only on his skin, but on the hearts of all who had seen. For in his pain, he had shown something greater than law, something stronger than fear. The price of compassion had been paid in blood, but it was a price he would pay again, without regret. The turning point, the human lay broken in the dark cell, his body trembling from the lashes that had torn his back open. The stone beneath him was wet and cold. Every breath burned in his chest, his arms ached, his vision blurred. Yet his mind refused to collapse into silence. He thought of the girl, her silver hair falling over her frightened eyes, her weak voice calling out for him as he was dragged away. That memory kept his spirit alive. It reminded him that though the council had stripped his strength, they had not stripped his choice. He had chosen to defy cruelty, and no chain could erase that outside the chamber. The city still whispered of him. The merchants who had laughed now spoke his name with unease. The nobles who had mocked shifted uncomfortably when they recalled the sight of him refusing to cry out. Among the common people, the story spread even faster. Carried from the marketplace to the taverns and homes, the human who had no power had stood against the council, and though he had been punished, his defiance echoed like a fire waiting to spread. The girl was taken back to her holding place, tied once more, though more loosely this time. The guards sneered, mocking her tears, but something had changed within her. She had seen him endure the lashes. She had seen him bleed and fall. Yet she had also seen him rise with fire in his eyes. She remembered his words, that she was not nothing, that she was alive, that she was worth saving. Those words burned brighter inside her heart than any chains that held her body. As night fell and the city lights dimmed, she slipped her small wrists against the ropes. Her skin raw, her arms weak, still she fought. The guards outside laughed and drank, careless in their pride, believing she had no strength left. But desperation can turn into courage, and pain can turn into power. With every scrape of her wrist, she thought of him, the broken man who had suffered so she could live. Her heart pounded as the rope finally loosened, and her hands slipped free. She staggered toward the barred gate, her small hands gripping the cold iron. Beyond the gate, she could see the path that led down to the dungeons where they had dragged him. She pressed her face against the bars and whispered, her voice trembling but filled with resolve. "I will not let them break you. I will not let them take you from me." In the dungeon, the human stirred, his body still heavy with pain, but his ears caught a faint sound. It was soft, fragile, but it reached him through the darkness. He raised his head weakly, his eyes opening. At first, he thought it was only the echo of his own mind, but then he heard it again, a small voice calling his name. It was her. Her voice reached through the iron and the stone. carrying hope like a torch in the blackness. The guards heard the noise and rushed toward her cell. Shouting at her to be silent, one struck the bars with his weapon, the sound clanging like thunder, but the girl did not step back. Her small body pressed tighter against the gate, and with a trembling voice she cried out, not only to him but to all who could hear, "He is not weak. He is not nothing. You punish him because he showed you the truth. He is stronger than your law." The words were like fire. The guards froze, stunned that a child would dare to defy them. Spectators in the hallways turned their heads, whispering in shock. The sound of her cry carried upward through the council chambers, where late-night gatherings were still held. Her voice, though small, pierced the silence of the halls. Each word carved cracks into the stone walls of their authority. The human's eyes filled with tears, not of pain, but of pride. He dragged himself forward, crawling despite the chains that bit into his wrists. His voice rose, weak yet unyielding. "Do not be afraid. You are stronger than they know." The guards panicked, for the silence of the crowd beyond the gates unsettled them. Their cruelty had always thrived on fear, on silence, on obedience. Yet now a child's voice and a broken man's defiance had stirred something dangerous. The crowd that gathered whispered in low tones, some turning away in shame, others staring with newfound respect. The counselors were summoned quickly, their robes trailing as they stormed into the hall. Their faces twisted with anger as they looked upon the girl still clinging to the gate and the human kneeling in chains. "Silence her," one counselor barked, but the order carried less force than before. The people had heard, and once truth is spoken, it cannot be unsaid. The girl's tears glistened as she turned her face toward the council. Her voice broke but did not falter. "You tell us that cruelty is law. You tell us that chains are order. But I have seen the truth. He showed me. He is only a human. Yet he chose to suffer so I could live. And none of you have shown such strength. Not even once." The chamber trembled with whispers. Some counselors stiffened with rage, but others shifted uneasily in their seats. The law was ancient, unquestioned for generations. Yet now a child had placed a mirror before them, showing their cruelty not as power but as weakness. The human raised his head, his face pale, his lips bleeding, but his voice rose again, soft and steady. "You may break me, but you cannot unmake what has been seen. She has spoken, and the truth will outlive both of us." For a long moment, silence filled the hall, broken only by the crackling of torches. The guards stood frozen, the counselors glared, and the crowd dared not breathe. The turning point had come, not in the clash of armies or the breaking of chains, but in the voice of a child, and the endurance of a man who had nothing yet gave everything. The law that once seemed unshakable now trembled on its foundation. For the first time, the council did not look like masters, but like rulers afraid of their own people, the legacy of defiance. The council chamber was heavy with silence, the torches flickering as if even the flames were holding their breath. The human knelt in his chains, his body broken but his spirit still burning. The girl stood pressed against the iron gate, her small hands clutching the bars, her voice trembling but filled with courage. Around them, the crowd of nobles, merchants, and commoners whispered in unease. Their hearts wrestled with a truth they had tried to deny. For years they had accepted cruelty as law. They had walked past suffering with cold indifference. But now they had seen something that could not be unseen. The highest counselor rose, his tall figure casting a long shadow over the hall. His 4 eyes glowed with fury as he struck his staff upon the stone floor. The sound cracked like thunder, demanding silence. "This farce ends now," he thundered. "The human will be executed, the child silenced, and the order of this city restored." His words echoed with power, but the silence that followed was not the silence of obedience. It was the silence of doubt. Among the crowd, faces shifted. Some lowered their heads in shame, others looked at one another with questions burning in their eyes. They had come expecting to see a weak fool destroyed. Yet they had seen strength in its purest form. They had seen a man with nothing stand against power, not for himself, but for a child he did not know. They had seen him suffer, bleed, and endure without surrender. And in his suffering they saw a reflection of their own cowardice. The girl lifted her head, her voice breaking through the silence like a bell. "No, you cannot silence him. You cannot silence me. You tell us your law is strong. But your law is afraid of compassion, afraid of kindness, afraid of truth. He is one man, weak, wounded, but he is stronger than all of you because he dared to care." Her words rang through the chamber, striking the hearts of those who listened. The human raised his head, his lips cracked and bleeding. His voice was faint but steady. "If my death is the price of compassion, then I pay it gladly. But know this, others have heard, others have seen, and the seed of defiance will grow." The counselors shifted in their seats, their authority trembling, for though they could order his death, they could not erase the words that had been spoken. They could not unmake the sight of him standing against their cruelty. They could not silence the child who now carried his fire in her heart. The guards moved forward, their weapons raised, but hesitation slowed their steps. Some of them had been the very men who whipped him, who saw him bleed and still stand unbroken. They remembered his silence. His words, his eyes, and their hands wavered. One guard lowered his weapon slightly, his mandibles twitching with unease. Another shifted his stance. Torn between duty and the weight of what he had witnessed, the people watching began to stir. No longer only whispering, some raised their voices. A merchant cried out, "He speaks truth. The child is not nothing." Another voice joined, then another, until the chamber filled with murmurs of dissent. Fear still held them back from open rebellion, but the cracks were clear. The foundation of the council's authority was beginning to crumble. The counselors, sensing the shift, barked louder threats promising punishment, demanding obedience. Yet their power no longer rang as it once had. Their voices sounded desperate. Their fear was visible. The people had seen too much. The girl stepped back from the gate, her silver hair glinting in the torchlight. She lifted her chin and declared with trembling strength, "You will not erase him. You will not erase what he has done. If he dies, his memory will live. If you break him, his spirit will remain. You cannot kill what he has given us." Her small voice rose with a force that shook the chamber more than the counselor's staff. The human's eyes softened as he watched her. Despite his agony, a faint smile touched his lips. He whispered, his words only just reaching her, "You are free now, not by chains, but in here," and he tapped his chest weakly, "carry it, and no law can bind you." The guards hesitated again, their steps faltering. The crowd pressed closer, their whispers growing louder. Courage flickered among them. "Fragile but real," the counselors shouted, but their voices no longer commanded fear. At last, the council gave the order, "Take him away," and this at once. But the guards did not move. Their hesitation became refusal. The silence that followed was heavier than any decree. For the first time, the council's will was defied not by one human, but by their own enforcers who dared not raise their weapons against him. The chamber erupted in chaos. Some shouted for freedom. Others fled in fear, but the tide had turned. The girl pushed forward, breaking free from the weak ropes that still hung from her wrists. She rushed to the human's side, falling to her knees beside him. Her small hands clutched his bloodied arm. "You are not alone," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. He looked at her with weary eyes, his body broken but his heart full. "Remember this moment," he said, his voice faint but resolute. "Not my pain, but the truth that no law can erase. Compassion is stronger than fear," the counselors shouted in fury, but their words were drowned by the rising voices of the people. The fire of defiance spread, unstoppable now, lit by the courage of a child and the endurance of a broken man. The human slumped against the cold stone, his eyes closing. But his spirit lingered in every heart that had witnessed him. That night, the story of the human spread through the city like wildfire. They called him a fool, a rebel, a martyr, but most of all, they called him a symbol. The child who had once been nothing was now a beacon, carrying his legacy. His defiance had not ended in silence. It had begun a new chapter, and so, in a world where cruelty had ruled without question, A struggling human's act of compassion became the seed of change. The price was paid in blood and pain, but the legacy would endure, not in stone or law, but in the hearts of those who had finally remembered what it meant to be alive